Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be wrapping up the 15 books that I read in January. What a great start to the reading year. There were lots of books for me to talk about in lots of different genres. I'm going to start with the fiction for grown-ups, then the children's fiction, and then move on to the non-fiction. I'm going to start with the final book that I read in the month, and that was Little and Lion by Brandy Colbert. This book blew me away. It is so good. The reason I read this was because it is the first book in Char's from Thoroughly Enjoyed Books. It's the first book in her bipolar book club. I've literally just watched her live show, which I will leave linked down below in the description. I read this basically in one sitting during reading sprints, and it was just such an incredible read. This book is essentially a glimpse into the lives of these two siblings. So we have Suzette and we have Lionel, or Little and Lion as they are called by one another. Lionel has bipolar, and the book follows a lot of the difficult things that adds to his life and to his family's life, and how his understanding of his own diagnosis progresses over the course of the book. We're also following Suzette as she not only tries to understand her brother more, but she's trying to understand herself more, particularly in relation to her own sexuality. And if you are looking for some bisexual rep, I would highly recommend this one. The representation of that in this book it got me in the honey nut filios. There is so much incredible inclusion in this book. Little and Lion are part of a blended family. You know, one of them is black, one of them is white. There is the mental health representation in there. There is the sexuality representation in there. And there are so many more seamlessly integrated, inclusive experiences in this book, like a character who uses a hearing aid. The book also explores what it is like for this family to be Jewish, particularly being a black person who is Jewish. And it just feels so authentic and true to life. It's a really beautifully insightful book, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. I have put this in with fiction for grown-ups, but I think it would be a great read for older YA readers. You know what, maybe just ignore me, I think this is YA. Next I have The Regulars by Georgia Clark. The concept behind this novel is so fascinating to me. So we are following three friends in New York City, three young women who are kind of going through like typical quarter life crises. And one day they discover this product called Pretty, which will make them extremely conventionally beautiful. It completely transforms how they look. They look like completely new people. And we follow these three different women as they come to realize the privileges that being this conventionally beautiful grants them, and how there are so many aspects of their lives that become easier because they are conventionally attractive. But then there are also so many aspects of their life that become terrible because of this. The book overall explores that while there is definitely a pretty privilege, how sometimes people will use attractive people to make themselves look better, like bringing a super attractive person to a party just so you can look great, like look who I was able to pull kind of thing. Or how if you're trying to make a really important, intelligent point, it will be dismissed because you're just a pretty girl. I think the book balanced those things really well and showed both sides, the negatives and the positives. It's been a few days since I finished this book, and I'm still not sure exactly what my thoughts are, because I think while it was executed really well, I think you kind of get the point just from the premise of this book, but it was still really interesting to see how that plays out for these three different characters. I do think if that premise is appealing to you, you know, a slightly Black Mirror-esque feminist kind of story, then I would really recommend diving into this and seeing what your thoughts are. The next book is one I listened to on audiobook, and it was a very short one. I read Kim Ji-young, born in 1982, by Cho Nam-ju, and this is translated by Jamie Chang. In this book, we're following the life of our main character, Kim Ji-young, as she navigates her upbringing, her relationships, her career, her journey towards motherhood, and how misogyny and sexism is always a factor in her life. We're following the really horrible sexist things that are done to her. We are following how societal structures and financial structures and career structures are so biased against women. And while there is a focus on what those experiences are like, particularly for South Korean women, I think there's so much in this book that any woman would recognize from their own life, regardless of their generation or regardless of where they're from. The book was really well written, but it is told in quite a matter-of-fact way. There's actually quite a lot of information and context and statistics given throughout this book about the experiences of sexism in South Korea. And there were parts of the book where I was wondering, why doesn't this author just write a non-fiction book about that, rather than it being told through this fictitious woman's life? But in saying that, I'm still really glad that I read it. I would still really recommend it. I learned a lot about the lives of South Korean women from this book. It did just kind of leave me like, yeah, sexism is bad. I'm glad we can agree. Like, it didn't leave me with much more to think about, because I was like, yeah, sexism is bad, we know this. Next I have, unfortunately, my most disappointing read of the month, and that is The Gap of Time by Jeanette Winterson. I really didn't like this. I find Jeanette Winterson's writing so hit or miss. Like, some of her books I've absolutely loved, and some of them I have been so lukewarm towards, and this one I really didn't like. This is part of the Hogarth Shakespeare series, where contemporary writers are retelling Shakespeare plays, and in this one, the one that's being retold is A Winter's Tale. The premise in both the original play and this retelling is that a baby girl is abandoned by her father and ends up being raised by, in the original play, a shepherd and a clown, and in this, two American characters named Shep and Chloe. Very creative. I found all of the characters in this book really two-dimensional. I didn't root for anyone in this book. I didn't care about anyone in this book. I found their dialogue very odd and not how actual people would speak. And to be completely honest, I just wish Jeanette Winterson would stop writing people that she very clearly doesn't know. Like, she very clearly doesn't know any people that are in any way similar to some of the characters that she writes. And like, you don't need to. I think some writers get very up in arms about the fact that they should be able to write whatever kind of character they want, no matter what kind of background that character has, what kind of history that character has. It doesn't need to be their own lived experience to write about that. And you know, I agree, it doesn't have to be. But if you don't do a good job, then people can tell you. And I don't think Jeanette Winterson does a good job of writing characters that aren't in demographics that she belongs to. At least in my experience anyway. You know, I've read a few of her books, I've definitely not read all of them. Unfortunately, this one just really didn't work for me. Next, I want to talk about Passing by Nella Larsen. This book is phenomenal, and books like this are the reason that I love short books. When there is a book that is not very long at all, and it manages to craft such interesting, nuanced characters, to give you a pacey, page-turning plot, and make the point that it's trying to make in such a small number of pages. Oh, it's just the best writing. So this is set in the 1920s in America, and it follows the rekindled friendship between two African American women. They knew each other when they were younger, and they meet again as adults, and one of them is living her life as an African American woman, and one of them is passing as white. And it's about the tension that it creates in their friendship because of that, and how they have such different life experiences because of that decision they've both made, whether they want to pass or not. There is a really powerful, tense, uncomfortable scene in this book where Claire, the woman who is passing as white, her husband comes into a conversation and is so racist, like so blatantly and horribly and despicably racist. And you know Claire is African American, and she's just putting up with that. Also, something nobody told me about this book before I read it was it's gay, right? It is. Yeah? If you've read this and you feel like it's gay, right? It's gay. I think it's gay. If you got something out of Britt Bennett's The Vanishing Half, I think this is something that would really intrigue you as well, and I think it's just absolutely fantastic. And the final piece of fiction for grown-ups that I'm going to talk about is definitely for grown-ups, and that is The Roommate by Rosie Danan. My god, this is the steamiest book that I have ever read. This book is so steamy. It is so good. I've not read a lot of romance fiction that has a hugely kind of erotic angle to it, so I'm definitely not a voice of authority on how good it was, but I mean, it got the reaction that I think it was meant to get from me, so anyway. This book is set in the US, and it follows a woman in her, I think it's late 20s, early 30s, who moves across the country planning to move in with this boy that she has been friends with since she was really young, and she's had a crush on him basically for forever. Turns out when she gets there, he is actually going off on tour with his band, and he has had to rent out his room to a complete stranger. So she is now, rather than living with her lifelong crush, living with someone that she's never met before. And it turns out this guy is a porn star. Obviously, something happens between these two characters, but this book is also a really fascinating exploration of the porn industry, of the adult entertainment industry, of how so much it is controlled by people with bad intentions, by people who don't care about the welfare of the performers, but how this industry could be transformed into something with greater protection, with greater celebration of sexuality. It explores how porn can be made feminist. I've not read a whole bunch of fiction in this genre, so I'm not an expert in it, but I do think it did suffer from the trope of like super naive girl and hypersexualized man. Like she was kind of so naive about some things that I didn't find it quite believable, but it's okay to, you know, it's fiction, so suspend your disbelief. Overall, I had a great time. Now moving on to the fiction for younger readers, I have Me, My Dad and the End of the Rainbow by Benjamin Dean. I would be shocked if this isn't on my favourite books of the year list at the end of the year, and I know it's only January, but just this book made me cry happy tears about the mere fact it exists. This is a middle grade book, and in this book we are following Archie, who knows that there's something not right in his parents' relationship. They are arguing all the time. He knows that they're splitting up, and he soon finds out that the reason that his parents have split up is because his father has recently come out as gay. This book is a wonderful exploration of pride. If you are someone who normally goes to Pride every year and was disappointed that you couldn't go this year, then this book will give you some of that joy and celebration. There is confusion from Archie about what he's found out about his father, but it's never from a place of prejudice or judgment. It's just from a place of wanting to understand what's going to change about his family. I cannot convey enough how joyous and wonderful this book is. If you are a parent, if you are a teacher, if you are someone that has any young person in their life and you want to share the essence of pride with someone, if you, like me, were a confused kid who didn't see queer experiences depicted in anything that they read, please read this, because it will just give you so much hope and joy that books like this now exist. Next I have Jungle Drop by Abby Elphinston. In this book we are following twins Fox and Fibber as they go off to the Jungle Drop, an unmapped kingdom that is in charge of all the world's weather. While Fox and Fibber have always been rivals, in this book they have to join forces in a race against time to find a forever fern before a harpy named Morg finds it. Because if she finds it first, Jungle Drop and our whole world as we know it will crumble. This book is so imaginative. The world that Abby Elphinston has created is so imaginative. It is just so filled with really inventive, cool, magical elements, and if you are looking for a cozy read, I would really recommend this. It was just so much fun. Another magical read that I absolutely adored was A Pinch of Magic by Michelle Harrison. This is the first book in the Wittershins series. There are 2 more books out in this series and I'm so excited to read those too. In this book we follow 3 sisters who are trapped by an ancient curse. Early on in the book they find out that there are magical objects in their family history that are being passed down generation to generation, and those magical objects are just so much fun. Again, it is just so imaginative. Throughout the course of the book we are following the sisters as they attempt to understand their family history more and try to break the curse that is quite frankly ruining their lives. It is so adventurous, it is so much fun. If you love books about sisterhood that demonstrate the conflicts in those relationships but also how that sisterhood ends up being more important than anything else, then I think this is one that you would really enjoy. Again, it is one that is just a lot of fun, and as I said, so excited to read the next 2 books in this series. And I have another middle grade book that is so adventurous. I have Dragon Mountain by Kevin and Katie Sang. In this book we are following 12-year-old Billy Chan, who goes to a summer camp in China. He would much rather spend his summer holidays at home enjoying himself. He really doesn't want to go to this camp, but while he is there he encounters an adventure that he couldn't have expected. When exploring alongside 2 of his new friends, they come across dragons and things begin to unravel from there. One of the things that I loved about this book was the different personalities of the dragons and how they themselves are really fun characters that offer really fun parallels to the children. Again, it's one that is just super adventurous, so if that sounds up your street, I think you would really like this one. I also read The Day I Fell Into a Fairy Tale by Ben Miller. This is another one that was just so much fun, and it is such a celebration of reading and books for children. In this novel we are following a young girl who realizes that there is a magical portal in her local supermarket. As I said, it's just a wonderful celebration of books and reading and storytelling. It takes some really classic fairy tales and gives them a bit of a twist in a way that I really enjoyed. And at the heart of this book there is the bond between a younger sister and an older brother, because to save the day they have to come together and the older brother has to find the joy in storytelling and playing and being a child again. This is just like peak cozy childhood reading. I also have Pizazz by Sophie Henn. This is a really quick graphic read that is about a family of superheroes. It's just such a joy to see how our main character has to balance like being a superhero with just like her day-to-day at school, how she compares her superpowers to the superpowers in the rest of her family. It's just so much fun to see how a normal family functions, but they are also superheroes, you know? There was also a really interesting kind of like eco-friendly aspect to this book, and it was really cool to see that parallel between these superheroes saving the world in this superhero kind of way, but also saving the world in the ways that we can do it. And can we talk about this cover and how shiny and wonderful it is, because I'm obsessed. Now moving on to the non-fiction, I have Girl by Kenya Hunt. This is a collection of essays predominantly from Kenya, but also some essays from other prominent black women, and all of these essays are an exploration of black womanhood. Kenya covers a lot of different topics here, like the different experiences she has faced as a black woman, comparing the US to the UK. She looks at topics like motherhood and how black women experience things like miscarriage and giving birth and being a mother in different ways than white women do. And it draws the links between a higher mortality rate for black mothers compared to white mothers. It makes the links from that to some areas of London, for example, not having as much funding for their hospitals, for their NHS, and how those boroughs have a higher population of black women. There's also a really emotional essay on Grenfell. Really highly recommend this one. I think it is important that we continue to read essay collections like this, read non-fiction like this. It's not something we can just do for a couple of months and then stop. I also read Quite by Claudia Winkleman. This is another book that is super cozy, and I think it is rarer to find a non-fiction book that is cozy than it is a fiction book. Claudia Winkleman is a TV presenter. I know her the most from Strictly Come Dancing, which is one of my absolute favourite shows, and this is less a collection of essays and more just random musings that Claudia has about life. There's not too much to say about this, you know, if you like Claudia Winkleman then you will like this, like it is her exact kind of sense of humour. I'd imagine this one would be really fun on audio as well. And finally I have Educated by Tara Westover. I felt like I was the only person left that hadn't read this book, and let me tell you, I had some mixed feelings on this. So I'm sure most of you have already heard the premise of this book, that it is about the Westover family who were essentially part of a cult preparing for the end of days, and Tara's father was really at the centre of this. He massively controlled the lives of everyone around him, preparing them for the end of days. We follow Tara's experiences moving away from her family, of getting an education, of realising the damage that her family did to her growing up, and how it's really difficult for her to come to terms with the fact that her family have done so many terrible things and really mistreated her, but she does also love them because they're her family. I did think it was interesting to hear Tara's story. One huge problem I have with this book is its repeated use of the N-word. Like, I just don't understand why it's necessary. Like, when I read it once, I was like, oh, okay, probably shouldn't have included that. Like, you can asterisk it out, you know, we're gonna know what was said. She is just relaying something that other people have said, but it's just used repeatedly and repeatedly, and I'm like, come on. Like, okay, we get it, this person was a racist, like, we get it. I do think it was really well written and well told, and a lot of the experiences Tara goes through are really harrowing, and I cannot imagine, I literally, I cannot fathom what it would be like to have those experiences and break away from them. I guess my experience of this book was just really dampened by something that didn't need to be there. So there we have it, they are all the books that I read in January. They will all be linked down below in the description if you would like to find out more about them. So now, at the end of January, my physical TBR stands at this number, so we are making progress. If you've read any of these books and you have any thoughts, do leave me a comment down below or let me know what you're currently reading. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will talk to you in my next video.